Good morning, everyone. Today we're going to look more at one of the big themes of exile that we briefly ran through last week, and that is how the Hebrews responded to the hugely influential creation stories that they would have been surrounded by in ancient Babylon. The most famous of these is the Enuma Elish, and this is a huge epic spread over a series of tablets that was found in Babylon, and it dates back to about 2000 BC. Now, this poem starts with Tiamat, who is sort of an ocean personified as a monster creature, and also Absu, who is a freshwater monster, a sea monster and a freshwater monster. They come together to make a series of demigods, one of whom is Ea. And eventually, Ea kills Absu in a fight. And Tiamat tries to take revenge on her slain partner and wages war on these gods. Ea organizes for his son Marduk to fight Tiamat, and he does so in the form of a storm god, forcing wind into Tiamat's mouth so she can't close it. He kills her, he splits her in two, putting half in the sky and half in the ground, and then he goes about setting the cosmos in order, creating the heavenly bodies and their movements along with the seasons. And finally, he creates the humans, and they are to be servants for the gods, and they go on to establish the rest of Babylon as well. Now, this great poem, along with other similar creation stories in other Near Eastern civilizations, have come to be called the Chaos Camp. This depicts a god who represents order defeating a monster serpent who represents chaos in order to gain control over the cosmos. It is essentially the victory of order out of chaos. And this idea is really important back in the Old Testament times. There were lots of things to take you out back then: nature, beasts, enemies. It was a dangerous time, and everything, all these chaotic elements, kind of came to be seen as an original precursor to sin or evil. Now, you're probably thinking, as I did when I first heard this, what on earth does this have to do with Genesis or creation? But there are quite a few verses in the Bible that actually mention this chaos monster in direct correlation with creation. In Psalm 74, 13, 27, you divided the sea by your might, you broke the heads of the dragons or Tannim in the waters, you crushed the heads of the Leviathan, you gave him as food for the creatures of the wilderness, you cut openings for springs and torrents, you dried up ever-flowing streams, yours is the day, yours is the night, you established the luminaries, the sun, and fixed the bounds of the earth, you've made the summer and winter. Then in Psalm 89, 9 to 11, you rule over the surging sea. When its waves mount up, you still them. You crushed Rahab like one of the slain. With your strong arm, you scattered your enemies. Your heavens are yours. The earth is yours. Everything in the world is yours. You created it all. So, if we go back to the Babylon myth, there are actually a lot of similarities between these two stories. For a start, both stories have a very similar order to creation account. Neither account seem to create the earth out of nothing or ex nihilo. The cosmos is produced out of what can only be called some kind of primeval and dangerous chaos, unformed chaos. In Genesis, God's Spirit is said to move over the face of the waters, and the Hebrew word for this is Ra'af, and it can signify spirit or wind or even an attacking wind, kind of like Marduk, the storm god, defeating Tiamat with a blast of wind. God separates the two waters, like in the Babylonian epic, and we even get our word abyss from the word Absu, from the god Absu. And in both accounts, the cosmos is put in order with celestial bodies and seasons, and in both man is created with the inclusion of some kind of divine substance. But of course, there are differences, and important ones. The biblical creation story can be seen and interpreted sort of in many different ways, but it is agreed by a large amount of scholars, probably most scholars, Old Testament scholars, that it is partly a polemic against the powerful Babylon myth, and some of these differences are that in Genesis, God is obviously the supreme creator and separate from both creation and the pre-creation chaos. And obviously Tiamat and Apsu were killed and ended up becoming the cosmos, parts of the cosmos. Marduk is not the supreme god. He's just the most powerful aspect of the created, sort of a lord or a king or a head angel or something. And this limited aspect of Marduk we mentioned last week, whereby the Bible in Genesis 10, he's called Nimrod, and he's called a great hunter. He's not a demigod or an angel, he's just a hunter and a builder of Babylon. So sea monsters, or this word tanim in the Hebrew, are actually mentioned specifically in Genesis 1, but they're mentioned in relation to God creating them with all the other creatures, just making them another one of God's creations. So in Genesis 1:21, we see the verses, "And God created the great sea monsters, and every living creature that moveth, wherewith the waters swarmed after their kind, and every winged bird after its kind, and God saw that it was good." So these forces of chaos do sort of persist, obviously, throughout the Bible, and we see them occurring again and again. We see it creeping into God's perfect garden as a serpent in the 2nd chapter of Genesis. And of course, chaos takes over the world again with the flood that God sent onto the world, largely as a result of the hubris brought on by the Tower of Babel. And of course, this watery chaos is defeated again by God when the Hebrews cross the Red Sea. And so we'll look at these ideas some more if we ever get around to looking at Daniel, and specifically in relation to the really interesting term, the Son of Man, and what that means to this topic.